right, so here are our 4 cups of flour in a mound. And now we want some salt, just a little salt. Un pizzico di sale is how they would say that in Italian. So now you have to use your hands, and we want to burrow right down into the center of this flour and make what's called the classic fontana, or fountain, or well, just like that. And now we have our eggs. So let's start with 4 large eggs right in the center. And we're going to make this into fettuccine today, but we're going to do something a little bit different with it. We're going to add some black pepper to this. So here's some coarse black pepper. I'm going to put that in. It's enough. And now I just want to take a fork and just beat those eggs up to loosen them up. You start bringing in the flour, mixing it in until you have something that I call a shaggy mass. It doesn't look good, but it holds together. And if you find that you get a hole like that, do not worry. Just bring over some of the flour and just keep mixing until you have a shaggy mass. Now we're really getting a ball of dough here. So now I'm going to lift that up and just move all of this off, because this flour I can always re-sift and use on my board. Okay, now we have our dough. And you want to go in a clockwise motion to get a nice soft ball of dough that when you're done does not have any flour seeping through it. So it should be nice and even. So we're going to take this and set it aside. And why don't you give me that one? And get rid of some of this flour. Not all of it. Here we have a rested dough. So, see the difference? Okay, now that we have the dough, we can make our pasta shape. We're going to put this through a pasta machine. And you see, I know that this dough is nicely relaxed because it's not slapping back at me. Oftentimes you have that problem when you're making pizza or other products where, you know, the dough just isn't ready. Here's our pasta. I'm going to give it a little flour, and I'm going to start out on 2. So I'm going to put it right through the machine. I normally take these sheets and I let them dry slightly. So if I tried to cut this while this is really wet, it would all stick together and be like glue. Let's feel this pasta sheet now and see where we are. It's just dry enough. Do you want to try it just so you'll know? It's not tacky wet. It's a little dry, but it's not so dry that we can't cut it. So we can cut it now. So we take the sheet, and I just kind of dust it in a little flour on each side. And now we have our cutter right there. I've moved the machine so that we can cut this on the fettuccine cut. Okay, so before we do the next one, I like to dry this for future use as well. If I were going to cook this right now, I would just have boiling water, and I would put this in the pot with a little bit of salt, and I would cook it. And as we all know, fresh pasta cooks in a lot less time than commercially dried. But for future use, if you want to save it, why don't you go get those dowel rods I was telling you about from the hardware store, and you just drape the pasta. I know this sounds like it's a lot of tedious work, but believe me, once this pasta is dry, you can keep it like this for months. I'm going to let you finish putting those on while I cut the second sheet. And nothing will happen to that pasta. No bacteria can get in there because it's super duper dry. So if there's no moisture, there's no way bacteria can ruin your pasta. But it must be brittle dry. And by brittle dry, I mean that I'm going to let this pasta hang here overnight. And when the ends curl right up, I know that that pasta is ready to store. Now you're saying, well, how do you get it off of there without it breaking? And that is a very good question. And the way you get it off would be to lift up the entire rod. Don't start picking these off because they'll break. Take the entire rod. I usually do this between two chairs. Position the rod between two chairs. I put some clean paper on the floor in case anything falls. And then I lift the rod, the entire rod up, and I tilt it. And I simply slip all of the pasta off onto a sheet of aluminum foil. It's very simple.